Terry Bunch, how did Congressman John Lewis factor into the building, particularly of the civil rights portion of the African American Museum of History and Culture? How did his stories help you formulate the story, to tell this story so the nation could fully understand the heart of the marchers and the hate of those who opposed it?
Well, one of the, as you know, there's no museum without John Lewis.
That's right.
So the entire museum is built on the shoulders of John Lewis. But what I was struck by is as we began to think about the content and began to think about the civil rights movement, the congressman and I would walk through the structure, construction, we'd look at artifacts, or we'd look at photographs. And every time he talked about what he learned from Medgar Evers, or why that image of Fannie Lou Hamer meant so much to him. And what it really reminded us is that John Lewis was a singular leader, but John Lewis recognized the power of history and the power of building, standing on other people's shoulders. At no point did he ever say to me, I, John Lewis, did this. What he always said to me was that he learned so much from Dr. King, that he remembered people in the Freedom Riders whose names he doesn't remember anymore, but their courage reminded him to always step forward. So in a way, we crafted the civil rights part of the museum based on that notion, that yes, it is a constellation of amazing stars, of amazing people who sacrificed, who envisioned, who dreamed a world anew. But it was also their ability to basically work together, to collaborate, and to recognize that there was so much that each person contributed so that it became a movement, not a story of an individual or two, but a movement. But even within that constellation, John Lewis was one of the brightest stars. And I think that what really helped me as we began to work on that section is I wanted John Lewis to help me find the right tension between pain, tragedy, and resiliency. And I remember talking to him about despair and saying, I've known many people in the civil rights movement who talked about moments of despair, but not where they despaired. And John said to me, I'll never forget, he said, there were moments of real fear, moments of real worry, but why despair? Because despair gets in the way of hope. And that in a way, John always felt that the key was to have a hopeful vision. But what I found so powerful about how he helped us shape this was to recognize that the civil rights movement was both about dreaming a new world, also about developing a strategy that would do that. So that for me, when I think of John Lewis, I think of the fact that there are so few people who really could dream a world anew, and even fewer who could think about how do you get to that new world, and even fewer who sacrificed as much, risked as much as John Lewis. So for me, what came out of that was the notion that we had to show that the civil rights movement was about the greater good, not just the greater good for African Americans, but for the greater good of the entire nation.